Welcome back. In this video, we're going to be talking about some of the different furnace configurations that are available for most gas furnaces. Now, when we talk about furnace configurations, we talk about how they're installed and how the air pattern moves through the furnace. The first and most popular one is the upflow furnace. I'll show you a diagram in a minute. It's mounted vertically with the blower below the heat exchanger. It's common in basement applications, and it's also seen very frequently in ranch-style construction where the air blows up into the attic and then across the ductwork in the attic. Return air can enter from either the side, bottom, or rear. So this is an upflow furnace, okay? So we have our return ducts here, okay? In this case, it's coming in from the side, okay? And then the air blows through the blower compartment, gets sucked in, blows through the heat exchanger, and comes out the supply plenum to the registers. Now, this same configuration can be used again in ranch-style construction that we see a lot in the southern part of the country, where we have a return duct or a return grill right here. This is in a closet someplace. And then this is the attic that we run our ductwork across the top of and come down. If there's air conditioning connected with this, there will be an A coil sitting on top of this between the heat side and between the heat exchanger and the plenum. So an upflow furnace just means the air is blowing up through the furnace. And again, the return air comes down, blows up, and heats up and comes out the supply registers and supply trucks. Now, the other type of furnace is a downflow. It's mounted vertically with the blower above the heat exchanger. Sometimes it's common on first floor applications, and it's extremely common if you work in any mobile homes or pre-manufactured construction where the ductwork runs under the house. The return air comes in from the top and blows out, and the supply air blows out the bottom. So here's a downflow furnace. We pull the return air off the ceilings, and we come out the floor with the supply air. So again, downflow, the air is blowing down. Another type of furnace is a lowboy furnace. Don't see these that often anymore because there's some other options like the horizontal furnaces now, but it's commonly mounted where ceiling height is limited. You see these sometimes in basements where the ceiling is very low and you don't have a lot of height. The blower is mounted behind the heat exchanger, and both the return and the supply are on the top. By the low boy, this is what we're talking about. The furnace is a really low one. Okay, you have the blower compartment mounted almost next to or behind the heat exchanger. And both the supply and the return ducts come in from the top. So we bring our return air in, we come through the furnace, we heat it up on the heat exchanger, and the supply air pushes out. Now, the one thing I want you to note is in all of these configurations that we've talked about, the fan is on the cold side of the system. Okay, so we don't blow air, we don't suck air through the heat exchanger. We always blow air through the heat exchanger. So when we're going to talk more about this, but the return side of the system is always what we consider the negative side. It's a low pressure. The supply side of the system, the heat exchanger side of the system, is what we call the positive side of the system. It's higher pressure than the surrounding air. But a low boy works really well in an area where you don't have a lot of room for plenums and headroom. Now, becoming more and more popular, depending on the installation, is the horizontal furnace. It's mounted on its side. It can have a return or supply from either end, and it depends on how it's configured. It's commonly mounted in attics or crawl spaces, and as you get down into the southern part of the country, you might actually see this mounted in garages up out of the way along the ceiling. The return can be from either side, but again, your blower will be on the negative side of the system, and the blower will be pushing air through the heat exchanger. So this is a horizontal furnace installed in a basement. We have a central return in this case, which I don't recommend. And we have our supply registers and duct. Now, if this was in an attic, just turn it upside down and the air would be blowing down. So once again, we pull our return air in, we increase the pressures, we push it through the heat exchanger and out the supply air registers. So again, it's horizontal. Now, if we needed to turn this around and blow that way, we'd have to make some minor adjustments in the furnace, but this just would be flipped over and mounted the other way. If there's air conditioning, you would have a coil in here as well between the heat exchanger and the supply air. So the different furnace configurations all has to do with how the air blows. Okay, so if we have an upflow furnace, the air is blowing up. If we have a downflow furnace, the air is blowing down. Horizontal to the right, the air is blowing to the right. Horizontal to the left, the air is blowing to the left. So if you remember those four configurations, and all we're doing is talking about how the air blows, you can always figure out what the installation is and what people are talking about.